Okay, namaste everybody. So this is the fifth session on Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and today let me just share my screen so that we can show you what's up. Here we go. So today we will cover only the first part. What is God? Reason being that I have from the time I thought of presenting today's presentation to now, I thought of extending this subject to include a bigger discussion on what is God, not only in yoga, but in all the other sampradayas as well. So we will not do the second part, how to relate with different types of people. I will take this in the next session. But please note, and there's a clue in this, I have not said who is God, I have said what is God. So make a note of this. So the shlokas we'll cover, and we'll go out of syllabus today because we'll discuss the conception of God in Vedanta, Buddhism, Jainism, and so on and so forth. But from the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, these are the 4 shlokas we will cover today. Basically, I thought of covering what is the idea of God in yoga. So the one shloka we'll cover is Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna Purvaka, Itaresam. Means up asamprajnata samadhi, we covered asamprajnata samadhi last time, can be attained through faith, will, recollection, and intelligence derived from samadhi, samadhi purvaka. And Ishwar pranidhana, that means success is also attained by those who surrender to Ishvara. And he describes Ishvara as klesha karma vipaka sayar aparamasta Purusha Vishesha Ishvara. Ishvara is a special Purusha, untouched by afflictions, actions, their traces, and their fruits. And the word to designate him is Om. So don't worry, just now I will explain all this to you as we go along. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just now. And we are back. So as always, I'll just recap what we did in the last 4 sessions. We said first that Patanjali felt that the knowledge of yoga had got fragmented across many texts of the Upanishads and the Agamas, and he felt the need to put its central essence in one place, which gave rise to the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. The second point about him is that yoga is very scientific. It does not require any belief. It just says, if you do this, this will happen. Second point we covered earlier was Patanjali's definition of yoga, which is quite different from most definitions. Most people define yoga as the joining of the individual consciousness or Atman with the universal consciousness, or what Vedanta calls Brahman. But Patanjali says yoga is the process of stopping the modifications of the mind. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And basically what happens is the consciousness, the real nature of consciousness is absolute stillness. But the stillness is constantly disturbed because thoughts, feelings, sense perceptions are all projecting itself on the screen of consciousness, and which is disturbing the consciousness. That is what is meant by vrittis. And if you stop the vrittis, you will realize that the essential nature of consciousness is stillness, and that is yoga. And there are 5 categories of vrittis. One is right knowledge. You see a rose and the message which goes into your mind that it is a rose. So that creates a disturbance that creates a pattern on the consciousness. The second is wrong knowledge. You see a rope, but the knowledge which enters your mind is it's a snake. That also creates a disturbance. And the third is non-existent knowledge, which is imagination. You can imagine anything. Imagination is that faculty which allows you to imagine anything you want, but it may not have any corresponding reality in the world. So that also, imagination also creates a vritti. No knowledge, surprisingly, is also a vritti, because in deep sleep state, for example, your mind is shut off, there are no objects, but there the consciousness is aware that there is no knowledge. So there's awareness of no knowledge, and that itself is a vritti. And finally, past knowledge, which is your from memory. You're pulling things out of your memory, which is also disturbing the stillness of consciousness. So these are only 5 categories of vrittis. And the method to stop the vritti is abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa is practice, constant, everyday, uninterrupted practice with devotion, and vairagya, which is non-attachment to worldly things. All right. And so all this so far, what he talked about is the negative aspect. So he has brought you to the neutral line. Now, once the vrittis are stopped, then the positive aspect of samadhi starts. And samadhi, we said, was of 2 kinds. One is sampragnata samadhi, where the mind is still active, and asampragnata samadhi, where the mind becomes inactive. All right. And the stages of samadhi we discussed was vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita. Basically, you in samadhi, you move from thinking to pure observation, from pure observation to reflection, from reflection, your thoughts completely stop, so you are filled with bliss. And in that blissful state, you can lose your sense of individuality or ego, which is called asmita. So these are the stages of samadhi. And the lower end of each stage is sampragnata, where the mind is active. And the higher end, as you move from thinking to observation, the mind stops, even for a moment or for a short time, it stops. That is asampragnata. So, and when you move from observation to reflection, again it stops. It's asampragnata. When you move from reflection to bliss, again it stops. So it is asampragnata again, and so on. So these are the 4 stages of samadhi. And today we will basically, as I said, we will discuss what is the conception of God. But just before that, where does God fit in Patanjali Yoga Sutra? So Patanjali says that there are merits required to achieve asampragnata samadhi. And he lists 3 methods. One is that there are some people who come from, with their past lives are such that, in the past life, they have accumulated some siddhis which show up in this life. So in this lifetime, they don't need guru, they don't need practice, they can get into samadhi like that. So 2 examples I can give is Ramana Maharishi and Anandamai, who both were enlightened at a very young age, around 16, 17 years old. They were enlightened, they had no guru, but it was the past karmas which made them enlightened. So that is one merit which will lead you to asampragnata samadhi. Most others, however, have to make some effort. And Patanjali says it requires Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, and Samadhi Prajna. So what does Shraddha mean? Shraddha means that you have a glimpse of reality. You have a glimpse of the Samadhi. All of us can have a glimpse of the Samadhi just like that, or while we are meditating, we get a glimpse, or we have read the Shastras and we get a sense. So that sense, you don't have a realization, but you have a knowledge, you have a sense, but you have full Shraddha in that knowledge. You are 100% sure that the knowledge is right. And Shraddha will lead to Virya. Virya is a determination, a will to realize that knowledge. So what is called mumukshu in Vedanta, which means you have a burning desire to attain liberation. So that is virya. And then smriti is a faculty which is required in sadhakas, because sadhakas will have to recall the object on which they are meditating, the mantra, the Ishtadevta or the yantra, whatever it is that they're meditating on, they will have to recall it. And especially if one is doing tantric meditation, then there is a series of mantras in the same session of meditation. So you have to remember 9, 10 mantras as you move from chakra to chakra. So that is Smriti. And finally, Samadhi Prajna. Samadhi Prajna is basically the development of a very high intuitive capacity, which is developed when you achieve Sampragnata Samadhi. Sampragnata Samadhi, as I said, is the mind is still working, but it gives you a Samadhi Prajna, or it gives you a very spiritual intuitiveness. So that faculty is required to achieve a Sampragnata Samadhi. Now, very interestingly, the third thing he says, he like, well, if people who don't have the mental capacity to even go through Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, for them, just, devote yourself to Ishwar. That bhakti, he brings in the method of bhakti in yoga. So just devote yourself, and that devotion itself will give you Samadhi Prajna, will give you the determination, will give you all that. You don't have to do the occult practices or rack your minds over it. So even people who just surrender themselves to God, they get, and in fact, more of them get Samadhi than the thinkers and the knowledge people. Okay, so this is what he says. So this brings us to the discussion on God. And so it's a complex subject. We'll come to the God of yoga later, but before that, we'll have a general discussion on God. So the one we are most familiar with today in the world, most people, is the idea of a personal God, what is called an extra cosmic God. I mean, the God which is believed to be the one in faiths like Christianity, Islam, Judaism. So this is a God, is a person who is outside the cosmos. He's not part of this universe. He's outside the cosmos. And from there, for some reason, he creates the cosmos. And he is in these three faiths. He's a jealous God. He wants you to believe in him only and follow his commandments, right? So this is the idea of God. Now, this idea of God was rejected by the ancient Indian thinkers. And I will tell you the reasons why it was rejected. So once we go through this, then we will discuss the dharmic ideas of God. So one thing, the Indian thinkers, they were very clear that whatever they come up with, whatever religious idea or thought they come up with, must pass the test of reason. You should be able to explain to somebody that idea logically. Even if you learned that idea or you experience that idea in meditation intuitively, you should be able to explain it logically. So to say it dramatically, the reality may lie outside the scope of logic, but it must not be illogical. All right. So this was a very, very strong belief or strong agreement amongst all Indian thinkers. And this extra cosmic idea of God defies logic and reason. And here the best person who has articulated this is Vivekananda. So Vivekananda, he says that when you're looking at the reality of something, there are two logical parameters. One parameter is that the explanation of that thing must be intrinsic. And two is that explanation should not only explain a particular, but the general. So he gives the example that you observe an apple falling. right? You observe an apple falling, and it is possible that somebody might say that when an apple falls, what actually happens is a ghost goes, plucks the apple and drops it on the and brings it down to the ground. That's a explanation is given. But that explanation does not satisfy logic because the explanation is extrinsic. It's not residing in the apple. So the logic demands that the explanation of an apple falling should lie in the apple and not outside the apple. So it does not satisfy this one particular condition. Second is that the what you discover is the reality. The particular should be able to be generalized. So can you generalize the ghost goes, plucks the apple, brings it down? He plucks the second apple, brings it down ad infinitum. That again is not logical. But when you say gravity, then the force of gravity is intrinsic. It's an intrinsic explanation. And it explains not only the fact of one apple falling, but it explains the fact of all apples falling. All right. So this idea of a extra cosmic God with relation to the universe goes against both these points. God lies outside. He or she or what it is not intrinsic to the universe. All right. And you cannot generalize. So you cannot say, I mean, in fact, if you say that a human being is God, it's a blasphemy in their case. So you cannot generalize creation, animals, human beings, trees, plants, rocks to God. So to that reality. All right. So for these reasons, this reason of logic, pure intellectual logic, this extra cosmic God does not have legs to stand on. And if Christianity, Islam, or Judaism were to debate with the dharmics, how Buddhism and Vedanta debated, how Jainism, Buddhism, Samkhya debated, they will lose in 5 minutes. Right? So that is one idea. The second and very important reason why this idea was rejected by the early Indian thinkers is because it closes the inquiry. What was the inquiry was not God. The religious inquiry in ancient India was, what is the reality of existence? Why are we here? What is my relationship with the sun and the stars and the moon and the whole universe? What is my role? So that was the inquiry. The inquiry was to get to a reality. And they were willing to accept any answer, that there is God, there is no God, or I don't know. So they were willing to accept because this was the inquiry. But this extra cosmic God business, it blocks that inquiry. So within Christianity or Islam or Judaism, you cannot ask the question of what is God? Can you prove to me? Because God is the one who has given religion through his prophet. So if the God has given religion, how can you question? Within religion, you can't question God. So then those who question God, they leave the religion. They become atheists, agnostics, whatever. So both these reasons, this whole extra cosmic God business was rejected because it didn't make sense, and it didn't make sense to an honest inquiry into what is the reality of existence. So now let's come back to India and the ancients. And if you look at the Vedas, there you can see some sort of a movement. It's very difficult to say whether there was a movement in chronologically or all Vedas were together. So it's very difficult to say whether it was a movement or 3 views existed simultaneously. So the one view was the nature gods, Indra, Agni, Vayu. So each element of each natural phenomena, it was believed had a governing deity or a god, and who who would power that particular phenomenon. So the god Agni god would give you heat and fire. The wind god would give you, storms and stuff like that. Indra was the god of thunder, and so on and so forth. Now, from this, many people in the West, they said that this means that the Hindus are polytheistic. That means they believe in many gods. But that is not completely true. And I'll tell you why. Because polytheism would imply that each god has a very fixed place. And but in this conception in the Vedas, the gods would wax and wane. I mean, today you adore Agni, so he becomes high. Tomorrow you say, no, no, I want to pray to thunder. So then Indra becomes high. So it was not a very fixed, they didn't have many fixed places. So they were neither uh, fixed entities, which is what polytheism would demand, and nor was there a monotheism. There was no leader of gods or one supreme god kind of a thing. But so that was one aspect. The other thing was that the Vedic people, they figured that there is tremendous order in the universe. The order is there in terms of seasons, day and night. It takes 9 months for a human being to, conceive and deliver a child. Women have their cycle, which is very rhythmic. So there's a lot of rhythm. They observed that there was a lot of rhythm and order in the universe. And this rhythm and order, then they said, well, if there's rhythm and order, there must be some intelligence and must be somebody who's the boss, who's governing all this. So then they came up with the idea of Prajapati. So they said, there's one governing entity called Prajapati. And Prajapati is the one who lends his powers to Indra, Agni, Vayu, etc. So there's a governing god and there are subordinate gods. God with a G, a big capital G, and God with small g's, right? But later on, even that did not satisfy the thinkers, because I remember the Indians were thinking. They were not fixated on some god of some story. They really want to know the truth, and they said, "No, this cannot be." What intuitively they felt was the god has to be a living, breathing soul of the universe. This universe is alive and kicking, and that universe must have a soul, and that soul must be God. And that's how, over a period of time, this idea of monism developed. Monism is a principle which contains all of creation, and that principle is contained in every aspect of the creation. So it's a soul of the universe. It's a soul of every individual in the universe. It's soul of all entities, right? And it is transcendent. This particular definition itself will make it transcendent, because if it's a substratum, then it does not exist like another object. So this question of whether God exists, Shankaracharya said, is a false question. Because when you say, does God exist, that question means that God should exist, like this bottle exists, or like this calculator exists, like another object. So Shankara says that the question itself is wrong. You cannot discover God by saying, does God exist? Because the God doesn't exist like an object. God is a substratum which contains everything. So the whole universe is contained in God, and God is present in every individual aspect of the universe. So God is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. And this, although intuitively discovered by the rishis, but it resonated with the logic which Vivekananda, as I told you, had enunciated. That the explanation of a reality of anything, in this case the universe, has to be both intrinsic and be able to be generalized. So in this particular case, everything which is relative, everything which is perishable, everything which is impermanent, can ultimately get sublated into this principal substratum of, say, Brahman, is as Vedanta puts it. So this is this was the flower of Indian philosophy. Now there was one more thing. The one more thing was that you know it intuitively, right? You know this whole reality, this God principle. You know it intuitively, but this knowing intuitively is beyond words. It's beyond reason. It's beyond logic, because logic, reason, words is in the world of duality, in the world of subject and object, in the world of something which you are seeing and someone who is seeing it, something you are hearing and someone who is hearing it. It's in the duality of there's a thought and there's a thinker. But the reality, the substratum, is where, thinking and thinker and seeing and seer, seen and seer is all one. Now, the mind just cannot comprehend it. It is inexplicable, that truth. It is experienceable, but not inexplicable. It's inexplicable. So the people who came down from this realization, and when they tried to communicate it, they found that it's a very difficult to communicate. It's inexpressible. So different people communicated it differently. And there is a famous shloka in the Rig Veda which says, Ekam Sat, Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, but the wise say it differently. And this is at the root of the famous religious tolerance, which is land development. Because all expressions of God is imperfect. So nobody can say that my expression is better than yours. All are equally bad. Again, let this sink in, that this is the real reason why there is religious tolerance in this country, because of just this one thing, right? And that is why when we can discuss God, we will see that different sampradayas have different impressions of God. And before that, let me tell you about the Buddha. The Buddha, in his discourses, refused to discuss God. When he was asked about Atman, God, he maintained a silence for exactly this reason. He said his logic was three reasons he had. One reason was that he said what cannot be expressed should not be put in words. What cannot be expressed should not be said, was his logic. That's why he kept quiet. It's called the golden silence of the Buddha, right? Second, he says that was a time when there was a lot of philosophical controversy going on. There were a lot of debates going on. Samkhya was debating with the Vaisheshika, was debating with Jainism, was debating with whoever else. And so it was a holy mess at that point in time. So Buddha said, this whole controversy and philosophy, he was very against philosophy. He says, because philosophy, the moment you get into philosophy, you get into dogmatism and no, I am right, you are wrong, that kind of stuff. And it takes you away from the task. And what is the task? He says, task is to get out of samsara. You guys are drowning in samsara. You'll be born again and again and again into this world where everything is impermanent, and you will suffer. So I'm trying to save you from suffering. So just follow my method and you will be delivered from this samsara to nirvana. But what that nirvana is, when you become nirvana, you figure out. So that was his logic. All right. But because of this whole philosophical debate going on at that time, there were different ideas of God. So let me tell you the idea, not in any particular order, but let me tell you the idea of Vedanta to begin with. So Vedanta says that there is a universal principle. There's a universal awareness, which they call Brahman, right? Or Atman. Atman is equal to Brahman. There's one universal principle, which is the God principle. It is pure awareness. And everything you see in this world, everything is an appearance. It is just names and forms. It has got no substance. It's got no reality of its own. Only Brahman is. And that theory of Brahman in Vedanta got developed into Advaita of Shankara, which is non-dual, and Vishishta Advaita of Ramanuja, Dvaita of Madhva. There are different, sections over there. But basically, Brahman is the sole reality, was by and large the thesis. So therefore, the one concept of God is the universal God. And in moksha or nirvana, we have the potential to lose our self identity, our ego, etc., and merge into that universal God, Sat Chit Ananda, as Vedanta calls it, right? So that is one idea of God. When we come to Buddhism, it's a little complex, because just like in so-called Vedic philosophies, there are different ideas. Buddhism itself has got three ideas. All right. So just very briefly, Buddha taught in three circles: the Hinayana circle, the Mahayana circle, and the Vajrayana circle. All right. So in the Hinayana circle, what Buddha talked about, because we remember, he was quiet about God. He didn't say God exists or doesn't exist. He didn't say anything. He was asked, does God exist? Quiet. So then he was asked, so are you saying God does not exist? He said, did I say that? So he was quiet about it. But his followers, the Hinayana followers, they said what Buddha meant is that there is no Atman, there's no God. And that theory is called Anahata. So anatta is there is no Atman. It is nothing. It is shunya. And so although it has been criticized, this theory, but their whole idea was what the Hinayana meditation basically tells you to realize that everything, all objects are just empty. It's got no reality. It just names and forms. It's just an appearance. It is shunya. But they say that if you are clinging on to a permanent Atman identity, it will stop you from getting there. So the first circle of learning which Buddha gave his disciples was that the world as you see it is empty. Then came the Mahayana cycle. So in the Mahayana cycle, they said that not only the world is empty, your mind is also empty. So how is that? He says there is a consciousness, and what is they defined consciousness as a moment of awareness. So when you see a rose and your mind registers a rose, that's a moment of awareness. So that moment of awareness is consciousness. And in the Mahayana, that consciousness was momentary. Moment to moment to moment to moment, the consciousness moved. That is called Vijnana, Vijnana. That means broken consciousness or split consciousness. It goes moment to moment to moment to moment. But what they say is that the world, yes, the world exists outside, but when you are getting it, you are getting it as a pattern in your consciousness. You're not creating it. The world exists. But the knowledge of the world is a pattern in your consciousness. Right? So the emptiness of that itself, because then you're not seeing the world is empty, but it's a play in your consciousness, even that is empty. So that was the lesson of the lesson of Hinayana was objects are empty. The lesson of Mahayana was even objects are empty and mind is empty. Then came the Vajrayana cycle, and the Vajrayana said, you guys have misinterpreted. They said that if that ultimate consciousness is also empty or shunya, then how is there anything? Even if there's a mirage, or even if everything is false, it's just an appearance, just a construction, just a dream. But even if it's a dream, somebody has to be dreaming it, no? So they said, ki, no, that what you call shunya is not empty. And he says, what you can do is that in a state of meditation, you can reach a place where you are in a clear light of awareness. It is just pure awareness in which all objects of the world are appearing. They're just constructions, right? So ultimately, Buddhism moves from one to the other in steps, but Vajrayana is exactly the same in its essence to Vedanta. Exactly the same. But having said that, be very careful, because the different sampradayas have different details, and the God lies, as they say, in the details. So if you just say, they're the same, then you have not understood. Then if you want to understand Buddhism as it is, you have to go through the details of Buddhism. You have to understand Vedanta, then you have to go details of Vedanta. And so both the sampradayas have their own different approaches. But all I'm saying is that ultimately it's the same thing, which is a universal God, right? So I discussed, one is the idea of extra cosmic God, second is the idea of a universal God. Now there's a third idea, which is present in Jainism. It is present in Samkhya. And that third idea is that there is no universal God. All right. So Jainism, for instance, says that this world has always existed. So since it's always existed from, timeless existence. So there's no need to posit a God. You don't need a creator God. All right. It's always existed. So they say there is no God. So in that sense, Jainism is atheistic. But that does not mean that they are irreligious. They say that karma itself has a force, and that force of karma will make you keep doing actions, create desires in you, action, desire, action, desire, action, desire, and birth, rebirth, birth, rebirth, birth, rebirth. And you need to get out of this cycle. But that consciousness and matter is both within you, and to get out of the cycle, the consciousness will take you somewhere, but you become your own God. So everybody who becomes enlightened, arhat, or jinnah, as they call it, is an individual God. And all these individual gods, they live in some kind of a mesh with each other. So that is the Jaina belief. So it does not believe in a creator God, but individual God. Samkhya, slightly different, but comes to the same belief, because it says there is consciousness, which they call Purusha, and there is nature, which they call Prakriti, or matter, mind and matter, intelligence and matter. And they say they are both different, both are real simultaneously, and somehow they interact, which they don't explain how, but somehow they interact with each other for this creation to come about. And for them, moksha is that you realize that you are not matter, that you are Purusha, right? And once you realize that in moksha, you become your own Purusha. So everybody becomes, like Jainism had, everybody becomes their own Jinnah, you become your own Purusha. So we have discussed the idea of extra cosmic God. We have discussed the idea of universal God in which everything merges. And we have discussed the idea of individual gods. Now, the people who hold that of the universal God, they have far stronger arguments against the others, right? But remember, the idea is what they are all agreed upon is the goal is moksha. The goal is mukti. The goal is nirvana. All right. They are not fussed at all whether on achieving that goal you merge with one universal or you remain your individual God. The goal is to stop your suffering, stop going from birth to rebirth, and suffer, suffer, suffer. All right. So that is the idea. So there is a extra cosmic God rejected. There's a universal God. Most of the systems of Indian philosophy would subscribe to that, but there are some who subscribe to the individual God theory. Finally, I want to come to atheism, which is also accepted. Now, as I said, there are two kinds of atheism. So even Samkhya, for example, I missed that. They say that Prakriti and Purusha are there, and these two are enough to explain everything in the universe. You don't need a creator God. So they also reject. So they are also atheistic. So one form of atheism is that you don't believe in a God, universal God principle, or a God person, creator God kind of person, but you're not irreligious. This is a very important point. You're not irreligious in the sense that you do believe that there is a force of karma, there's rebirth, and there's suffering, and there's a way out of suffering. There is moksha. In that moksha, what happens, whether you become an individual God or a collective God, that is what they're debating. But so they are atheist, but they are not irreligious. So this is very important. Now we come to the atheists of today. So atheists of today are the ones who, why are they atheists? And here the atheist meaning is no God and no religion. Even religion is false, is the belief, which is the most people you would meet today who say, no, I'm atheist, would say that. Now, there are two reasons for that. One reason is that they are not, they're finding the theology of religions absurd. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that God created the world in 7 days. It doesn't make sense that he created the world on 13th October, 4004 BC. And even if you 4004 BC, if you dispute it, what was happening from 1st January to 12th October? If Adam and Eve sinned, why am I suffering? How did Mary give virgin birth? So this is absurd theology. It is unscientific. It goes against science. The world is flat, goes against science. The sun sets in a swamp, goes against science. All right. So this absurdity is getting people to go away from religion and become atheists. The second reason is they're seeing the religious strife. The Christians saying my God is the only God, the Muslims saying the same thing, and they're fighting with each other and fighting with others who don't even care whether what you believe. You believe what you want, but they are coming and killing them also. So they don't like this. They don't like this whole idea. They in their mind, religion is a bad thing because people are killing in the name of religion, right? So they are again going away. But just on a side, the religious thinking will never go away because the question, why am I here? What is the reality? Is a inbuilt urge in the human birth. It's inbuilt. That question will never go away. Now you can use that question to do what the Dharmics did, or you can use that to exploit as the Abrahamics have done. All right. But that question will never go away. Religion will never go away. So that atheism is a reaction, right? Now, atheism of that sort also existed in India in the form of a system called Charvaks. It was set up by Rishi Brihaspati, where he also said ki, there's no Atman because the matter itself at a certain level of complication will develop consciousness. And he gave the example of wine, quinoa. And he said, like, the ingredients which go into wine are themselves not intoxicating, but the end product is intoxicating. All right. So he says similarly, there's no consciousness in matter, but that combination somehow gives rise to intelligence. So there's no need for God and all that. But And therefore, he said, like, the only logical thing to do is enjoy the good things of life and avoid pain as much as possible. And when you die, you die. The ultimate moksha is death. When you die, it's over. So everything is on in this life. Your hell, heaven, enjoyment, sorrows, everything is in this place, is what the Charvaks said. But Charvaks were also reacting. Charvaks are reacting to two things. One is, this whole thing, what the Vedas said, that, non-attachment, vairagya, and this practice and all that. They said, oh my God, it's so complicated. I'm talking to you. Some of you might be thinking, Arey baap re baap, let me go and have a drink. Kya bol raha hai? So this high level thing went over the heads of lots of people who were very attracted to Charva. This is damn good, yeah. Apna mauj karo, have your kinwa, and he says over there, I mean, pleasure means, good food, good wine, damsels, good women, so it's there in Charva. So it's very, very seductive, was the other reason. So, but it was also a reaction to the one, as I said, the very intellectual aspect of this quest. And second was, they saw the rituals, I'm talking about ancient India, as also very dhongi. Yeah, they saw it as a livelihood of the priests, and it had no real meaning. All right. So the lesson really is that if you lose touch with spirituality, if you cannot take spirituality and democratize it, then you run into a danger of the Charvak or atheism, as is happening today. All right. So this, I've covered all the ideas of God. There is a extra cosmic idea. There is a universal idea. There's a individual God idea. Each one is a God, and atheistic idea. And atheists of two kinds: atheistic in terms of creator God, but not in terms of religion. And atheism, which rejects God and religion. So these are the ideas of God. Very briefly, before I close, I'll just take you through yoga's idea of God. So yoga, as you know, is based on Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya says no God, but yoga says yes God. So yoga says there is Ishwar. And he says, if you cannot do all that Shraddha, Virya, and all that, just surrender to Ishwar. Do bhakti. And if you do bhakti, you will get samadhi. So it is believed that Patanjali posited God to make yoga accessible to larger number of people. All right. So unlike Vedanta and all, which gives a lot of description of God, he doesn't describe God in any great detail. So what he says about God is that he doesn't have afflictions. And there are 5 afflictions. There is ignorance, ego, likes, dislikes, and fear of death. There are 5 afflictions which all humans have. This is God is free from all this. Ishvara is free from these afflictions. Then he says that he's also free from fruits of actions. Like if we act, then we either fruits, good or bad, results we get out of our action. But God is, Ishvara is free from that because he is desireless. So for him, there's no action. I mean, whatever he's doing is without any desire. So the fruits of action don't apply to him. And the third thing he says that is connected. He says, when we act and whatever fruit we get, good or bad, there's an impression which is formed on our consciousness. It's called samskara. And samskara gives us our character, and it in turn gives us future births, etc., etc. So because this guy is desireless, he's got no samskara also, no traces, no bija, nothing is there, no trace, right? And finally, we all have little knowledge, right? But Ishvara is conceived as one who has got all the knowledge, the infinite knowledge Ishvara has. And therefore, Ishvara is said to be the most ancient teacher. You've heard stories of Shiva teaching the Saptarishis and so on and so forth. Ishvara is the teacher of the ancients because he's got all the knowledge. This is the idea of the yogic God. And because human beings have weaknesses, have this kleshas and this afflictions, and they suffer the fruits of karma and all that. So they need and they have egos, and so they need somebody to go and surrender this on. Who will you surrender it to? You have to surrender somebody who's superior to you. So this is the most superior concept within the within Maya is Ishvara, and therefore you surrender to Ishvara, and that surrender itself does things, and you move towards moksha, right? And the how do you surrender? He says the symbol of God is the pranav, which is Om. So they say, the Patanjali says that uska Om ucharan, that is incantation of Om, but not only incantation, you have to meditate on the meaning of Om. So the Om is made of A, U, Ma. A stands for the waking state. That means it stands for what you see in the world. Your interaction with the world is what A stands for. So you have to meditate on what this world is, right? U stands for the dream state. That means the thoughts in your subconscious which are coming up in dream. So you have to meditate on dream. What are these thoughts? What are these hurt feelings which I have, which I need to heal, etc., etc. So meditate on that. And Ma is the deep sleep state. The deep sleep state is when where there's no mind, there are no objects, and you meditate on that, you will get insight into samadhi. And the transcendental state, the Turiya, which is the Purusha of yoga or Brahman of Vedanta, is the Bindu. In Om, the Bindu is the transcendental state. So he says not only ucharan, but also meditate on it and surrender to God, be bhakt, and you will get a asampragnata samadhi. Great. So I'll stop here, and I'm happy to take questions. Rajiv, can you put it on like everybody on the screen? Yeah, that's great. Any questions, anybody? I'm happy to take it.
Atul Bhaiya, you can start. Atul Bhaiya कह रहे हैं, चेतन भाई, you can start. ये आपकी इंटरेस्ट का सब्जेक्ट है. You can unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I don't have any questions.
अभी आप बोले.
I just loved hearing.
अभी चेतन भाई, अभी आप इस प्रोग्राम के शुरू में बोले कि आपकी प्रोफेशन है, लोग क्वेश्चन करते हैं तो आप कमाते हो, नहीं क्वेश्चन करते हैं तो और कमाते हो, कंफ्यूज क्वेश्चन करते हैं तो सबसे ज्यादा कमाते हो. तो अतुल भैया भी वही कह रहे हैं, पूछोगे तो मैं रिस्पेक्ट करूंगा, अच्छी पूछोगे तो मैं बहुत रिस्पेक्ट करूंगा, नहीं पूछोगे तो मैं स्विच ऑफ कर रहा हूँ.
ये तो कंफ्यूजन दूर हो गई ना.
So, what are these deities? The deities, are they God? Are they deities?
Oh, great. So it depends on. Okay, let's look at it from one point, because it becomes very confusing if you look from every point of view. Let's look at it from the point of Vedanta, where the God principle is Brahman, right? But there are within Maya, there are many powers. So there are many versions of powers, right? Even in, if I go to Tantra, this will become even better. But let me just explain the Vedanta perspective. So there are many powers. Whoever you, in Vedanta theory, whoever you pray to, whichever deity you pray to, is you ultimately, like, you are worshipping Brahman, right? You're worshipping Ishvara. Ishvara or Brahman. Ishvara is Brahman within Maya is Ishvara, and Brahman outside of Maya, Nirguna and Saguna. So you're ultimately praying to Brahman, right? But you're using a deity that appeals to you. So if you're fascinated by wealth, you will pray to Lakshmi. If you are looking at auspiciousness, you'll pray to Ganesha, and so on and so forth, right? So each deity has its own, productive principle, so to say. But through the deity, you're praying to, your Brahman. All right. Tantra, I didn't cover Tantra in the talk, but Tantra is also very, very interesting. So let me just cover it very briefly. In Tantra, can you come, Rajiv? Can you put it on that everybody is seeing together? That's better. So in Tantra, like what Brahman is to Vedanta, in Tantra, he is called Paramashiva. Right. So now this Paramashiva in Pralay, Paramashiva is there, there's no creation. And the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are in absolute dynamic balance. It's in balance. And then spanda or vibrations begin. And what happens is first a straight line of vibration, of sattva goes, right? And then tamas becomes active. And when tamas becomes active, I don't know why, I'm just explaining it. The vibration line curves. And when it curves, what happens is there are multiple vibrations. So there are multiple vibrations and curvatures, which account for multiplicity. I believe that quantum physics has a similar theory, but I am no expert in quantum physics. But what I'm trying to say is that Tantra had this, which quantum physics is kind of, so I understand is agreeing with. But what happens in Tantra, it says that Paramashiva, when the time comes for Shrishti, he imagines the world, but the Shiva principle is inactive. It is conscious but inactive, and it has a Shakti principle, which is a dynamic principle. So Shakti takes over and displays the world of colors and objects and forms and all that. Shakti is conceived as the feminine principle, and Shiva is the masculine principle, the yin and yang principle. But at a philosophical level, Tantra also says that these are not two different aspects. Everything is Paramashiva, but the mind cannot understand it. The mind is analytical, and therefore it has to divide. It cannot understand this unity. So the best they explain it is like salt in seawater. So salt is the Devi, and the water is the Shiva, for example. Or air in space, where you cannot take out air from space. You cannot take out salt from seawater. You can, but I mean, in the example, it's like one whole. But it's only because the mind analytical you have this separation. But actually, there is no separation. Then, unlike Vedanta and Vajrayana, which says that the world is an appearance, it's unreal, the Tantra reacts very strongly against it. They say, how can it be unreal? It is Paramashiva's expression. So how can Paramashiva is real? How can his expression be unreal? Right. So the other reason Tantra says, and coming back to your question, Gunjan, Tantra says it is this appearance they have a big problem with, is because this Maya Shakti, the Shakti in the universe, in the created world, is what we use to rejoin with Paramashiva. So the whole tantric process is to use the power of Shakti to get there, right? And to get there, the steps, and each step there's a different deity. The deities are the same. It's a Devi only, but Devi is Lakshmi, it is Durga, the 9 forms of Durga. We just went through Navratri, 9 forms of Durga. It's only Durga, but each form has a certain significance, Pratyangira, and so on and so forth. So, so each aspect of the deity has a certain job to do. It kind of, vitalizes some chakra or the other in Tantra. But long and short of it is that whoever you worship is your choice. but ultimately you're worshipping Shiva Shakti or Parama Shiva. Whoever you worship is your choice, but ultimately who you're worshipping is Brahman or Ishwar, right? So this is the part of the democratization, and really, I mean, I think our ancients have to be like absolutely. We have to like fall flat on our. We have to do Ashtang Namaskar like 24 hours a day to them, because they democratized philosophy. What a difficult task it is. What a difficult task it is to democratize metaphysics. I mean, I can't think of anybody who democratized quantum physics. But these guys did it. And India is the only country in the whole universe through time which has done this successfully. And this ties in with your question, because then you can choose whatever deity you want. You can choose nothing if you want. You can say it's all crap. You can be a total skeptic. Yep.
Then why the exercise? If it does or doesn't matter, why this whole exercise of going through it?
No, it matters, because your goal is moksha. Everybody agrees. Samkhya says, Yoga says, Vaisheshika says, Advaita says, Dvaita says, Jainism says, Buddha says, all the forms of Buddhism says your goal is moksha. It's not for nothing. So there is something. What the something is, some say it's individual, some say it's collective. That's a different issue. But on the fact that this world is suffering, and suffering has a meaning. I mean, not in a maudlin sense, but it has a meaning. That the birth you have taken in this body has a meaning, and if you use this body and this suffering to rise towards moksha, then you have utilized your body. Otherwise, you have wasted your time in this lifetime. You'll come again next lifetime to waste again. So it is not for nothing. The goal is moksha. The goal is, call it moksha, nirvana, kaivalya, mukti, whatever you choose to call it, but that's the goal.
Bhaiya, if I can interject.
Yes, please.
Off the records and off the shows, Shibani, I don't know whether she as a student is just logged in or she is actually attending. If she is attending, then this is directed towards her. I think just now what you explained, I keep on and on telling her similar kind of thing. She says, life में कुछ नहीं चाहिए. बच्चे लोग का ख्याल रखो, हस्बैंड का ख्याल रखो. That's what life is all about.
ठीक है, तो ठीक है. That's her reality. It's okay. वो अपना हस्बैंड का अच्छा ख्याल रखेगी, बच्चों का अच्छा ख्याल रखेगी. She will get moksha faster than all the books I read. सबका अलग रियलिटी होता है.
So you
that remember the concept. I mean, if I were to take this example and generalize it about the swadharma, the varna ashram में सबका स्वधर्मा होता है. I mean, if you
देखे अभी मान गए ना, अभी आप माने ना. मेरा खुशी इसी में है. I am happy with my children and husband.
बहुत बढ़िया, बहुत बढ़िया.
I'm not debating on that. I'm only trying to help you understand that there is a higher self contribution when you have taken birth in this lifetime, and it can also be just this much.
No, but this itself, if she does this job, what she's doing with full awareness, उनको reality आ जाएगा.
बस आपने यहीं पे एक ट्विस्ट डाल दिया. ये अवेयरनेस वाली चीज
बिल्कुल अपना पूरा प्यार संस्कार ये ज्ञान के साथ करें तो इसी में आ जाएगा, सर्विस करने में आ जाएगा. अरे बिल्कुल. अब तो आप जो जाओ कोई वो सिद्धि साईं बाबा के वहां पर मंदिर में लोग अपना ये सर्विस करते हैं. they can reach great heights. तो स्वधर्म इसी यही है ना, सबका अलग अलग धर्म होता है ना. ये दिस इज द प्रॉब्लम. हम लोग का, हमारे जनरेशन में हमारे माँ बाप बोलते थे डॉक्टर बनो, इंजीनियर बनो, तुम्हारा स्वधर्म जो भी होगा. मेरा स्वधर्म नहीं था. हम गए 1 साल हम मेडिकल भी पढ़े, हम बोले कहाँ फंस गए, और फिर वहाँ छोड़ छाड़ के जाए इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़े. और रमेश को देखिए, वो अपना इंजीनियर पढ़ के he became a submarine engineer.
बट आजकल के पेरेंट्स कभी भी बच्चों पे थोपते नहीं है.
अब नहीं, अब तो
बच्चे का इंटरेस्ट, हाँ,
नहीं,
बच्चे का क्या इंटरेस्ट है.
नहीं, बट शिवानी जी, थोड़ा सा ये भी देखना पड़ेगा कि हमारे पेरेंट्स का था थिंकिंग, इंजीनियर डॉक्टर नहीं बनोगे तो नौकरी नहीं मिलेगी, कोई तो शादी नहीं करेगा. आजकल बच्चे जो भी करेंगे उनको अपॉर्चुनिटीज, अगर नहीं होता तो आप भी वही करते. तो this is there, क्या opportunities are there, you can do anything and do, so that is also there. But I just gave this an example of swadharma. Swadharma means आपका जो धर्म है वो फॉलो कीजिए आप.
शंकराचार्य said, यद्यत् कर्म करोति शंभोस्तस्त तत्तत् तवाराधनम. अगर मैं मेरा स्वधर्म करता हूँ तो भी वो प्रभु आपकी ही भक्ति है.
बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल. जो भी कीजिए डिवोशन से कीजिए, अवेयरनेस से कीजिए, बीइंग इन द प्रेजेंट मोमेंट कीजिए, आपको उसी में मिल जाएगा. अरे क्या वो जो हम I like to take examples of cricket. When this Virat Kohli and Sachin Tendulkar, they say I was in the zone. What do they mean? All sportsmen have this experience of being in the zone. They're in samadhi. They have forgotten what they are not thinking कि अब हमको फ्रंट फुट में खेलना है कि बैक फुट में खेलना है. They're in the zone. माने उसमें तो the distinction between bowler, batsman, game, everything is got into one thing. They're just expressing themselves. तो वो भी होता है. Suddenly you some.
I have one question. Can you hear me, Atul?
Yeah, I can hear you, Ramesh. Go ahead, Ramesh. You got frozen.
No, he has to then log out and log in.
He's got frozen. Anyway.
Hello.
He's back.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You can, you got frozen in between. So if you have repeat your question.
Saying, do you believe in reincarnation being one of the facts that some of these theories that you've been talking about? Say yoga. Does yoga believe in reincarnation of birth? Okay, yes. Rebirth is possible, no doubt. Will be possible for order karma unit. But is reincarnation possible?
What do you mean by rebirth? And I thought it's the same thing.
Reincarnation is actually you remember what you were in the last birth, and then you sort of try and work on it.
I will not be able to explain this in any great detail. I don't have that knowledge, but I do know that there are people who remember previous births and all that. I mean, there have been documented cases of that.
Okay.
But rebirth, of course, is there's a logic to it. The whole karma theory of karma will give you the logic.
Okay. So how many cycles of births does one really take? Is it just because the number of karma cycles?
Crores. The Shastra says, how do I know? The Shastra says you can take crores of births.
But I think that question sounds very exciting.
Very exciting, but it requires.
If there is a science of reincarnation, it would be really wonderful. Even if we have one living example, a person who has taken rebirth and could recollect from the previous birth things.
But you hear of siddhas and all who come down, the avatars, all that you hear about. But this theory in great detail, I don't know. But But there is, I'm sure to your question, there will be, there is knowledge in this field with some guru. I mean, it will require a very high level guru to explain this. But avatars happen. You know, the siddhas and the people who are enlightened, they come down. There's the case of the famous Mahavatar Babaji in the Himalayas, who has come and gone over thousands of years.
In art of living, there is a process of eternity process, where the persons who are participating, they should be following all the courses since long time, and the person can get some sound impression of previous births.
Oh, wow.
Because my wife has not done that course. She is an art of living teacher, but many other senior persons in her group has done this process.
No, this past life therapy is there, no, in transactional psychology, in Western psychology. Also, there's past life. I've been through it. Past life.
This is purely Eastern psychology. Our yogic this thing only, not Western. It's our
no, I understand. I'm getting it. But what I'm saying is, past life therapy is quite common. I mean, anybody can attend a past life, either in art of living, or even. Yes. I mean, the one I attended in the 90s was taken by a Dutch lady in Bangalore.
Okay.
It was in the mid 90s or something, and I regressed into some past life. I saw something.
तो पास्ट लाइफ अगर ह्यूमन में नहीं हुआ होगा, आप कीड़े
नहीं, वो हमारे ग्रुप में there was one lady who was very foxed, no pun intended, but she had it discovered that she had an animal life in the past.
Okay, go ahead.
Wow. I am never going to go through that.
Which one?
ये बड़ा खतरनाक है.
हाँ, अपना मीट
खाना पहले का बता देगा तो खाली उसमें बंदर, पता नहीं चूहा, वही सब दिखेगा.
तुम बहुत लाल मांस खाते हो, तो बच के रहो, और फेसबुक में पोस्ट भी करते हो, तो डबल वैल्यू. Okay, Dr. Kanguli, freshly minted.
By the way, I'm just sorry to interrupt. Are you recording this and sending this?
Yeah.
I missed some part of in the early stages, you know, of your talk.
All right. Chandru? Chalo, they've all gone away.
No, he's dead.
Yeah, but he's not responding anyway. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Atul. I think you're quite enlightened. You're only in the next stage of much higher stage than us, huh?
Let me tell you, this is never ending. I mean, not me. I mean, enlightened people. I've asked, and they said, "This you never stop, sadhana. When do you stop?" The question I asked, when do you stop, sadhana? You're enlightened. He says, "You never stop, sadhana."
Yeah,
never.
But I think Ramesh brother, taking the clue out of you, I mean, at least in Bihar, we do, Chhat is approaching, like they pour water. The person who's actually doing the puja, that lady pours water, and all the other people, they just hang on to her elbow. And they also get that energy flowing with them. So that's what we will do, at least, though Atul Bhaiya, you must be knowing, is a very humble person, full of humility. He claims he is not entitled, I mean, enlightened, allowed. We'll just tag onto him. And then he'll let him continue saying he is not enlightened, but we will proclaim we have become enlightened.
So two things can happen. If you hold on to my legs as I'm going up, you can come up with me, or you can pull me down also. Both things can happen.
I said elbow. I said elbow. Mind it. So on this happy note, if we are allowed no more questions, then do you have any questions to crack us up late in the evening?
I think once we get the recorded version, we can still chill and wind up. Because what happens?
Every 15 days, until unless Bhaiya is committed somewhere else, we do regularly have this source, and all these shows are recorded and uploaded on YouTube.
Okay, good. That's nice. Because then I can go through that in a normal
At least, yeah, that's the intention. That's the idea.
Today I had a lot of audio issues. I just couldn't listen to most of what Atul was saying.
Okay. You'll get the YouTube, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to do that. I thought that's one of the reasons why I couldn't ask any questions either.
Okay. So then we call it evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Atul.